Try again. Yeah, man, be nice. Okay, so that's been a pain. Luckily, I got, I think, just check. Indeed. Well, let's have one last try. Let's see if we. No, okay. So we'll just have to do that in another night. I'll go through the process there. Okay, so you should be able to export your model into Blender from Web Model Viewer in a .obj format. So that's what we imported there, was the OBJ, and that comes with the materials file as well, and it tells Blender what materials belong where. However, that's only in the Blender render engine. If you go into material view now, you'll see that there's some weird stuff going on. We're not going to be using the Blender render engine, so the first thing we need to do is set up the actual scene itself. So if we come over here to our dimensions, and we're going to keep this at 50% for now, because while we're doing the test renders, we want to keep it at low. When we do our final renders later, then we'll bump it up to 100%. Okay, so we then want to come up here and change the Blender render to the Cycles render engine. And you'll think, oh, what's happened? Because all the materials have disappeared. They have to some extent, but we will be able to get them back quite easily. So the render settings, I'm going to be rendering on the GPU. However, this will work quite fine on the CPU, and I will tell you what the settings that you need to do the render on CPU rather than a GPU. So you come down to performance, and for CPU you want to change both of these to 16, and that will give you, so this is the tiles. If we have a look, just put it on CPU. This isn't going to work very well because there's no real light in the scene. That gives us the fastest render in CPU. However, if we're doing it on GPU, the bigger the tile, the better. I set this to 254. And that then works quite quickly. It's going to get a lot slower the further that we go on. Remember to always save your work as well. And with Blender, it is quite a powerful piece of software, and it is prone to crashing when, you know, your CPA gets pretty high. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so that's that. And right, sampling. So the sampling section, we are gonna bump this up to 20 samples. That is far too low for a final render. However, to keep rendering times quite low, then obviously we want to keep that quite low for now. Just see if we can adjust the camera a bit. Excuse me. Okay, so now what we need to do is get the materials reapplied back to the character. So we've imported our character here, and as you can see, each different section is a different piece of mesh. If you did this as an FBX file, which you can't at the moment in the current version of Blender. However, I have actually submitted a development ticket today to the Blender Foundation, and somebody has fixed it for the next version. So it could very well make it into the next version. However, as we'll see a little bit later on, when you're actually importing, you get a huge mess of bones, and it looks ridiculous. But that's how the FBX files are imported, unfortunately. We have to stick with that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply our materials to each layer, and as we do, we're going to hide it so we can get to the layers underneath. So if we start from the top and work our way down, what we need to do is come over to this materials panel here, and you'll notice that there is a material already applied to it. If we select use nodes, and then it'll give us a diffuse shader, which is basically the coloration of the mesh. So in the color section, you'll see it's set to black, or it might be set to white depending on which piece that we're looking at. But there's a little button here next to it. If you click that and change it to image texture, the image texture, and then we're actually on material mode. Yeah. Don't click on open, because when we imported the object, it already imported it. As you can see, we've got all the different materials in here now. It seems like a lot, but there is actually probably only about 5 different materials on here. So this is part of the helm. So we go to DreamPaw helm and change it. And then if we press H on the keyboard, that hides it. Right click to select the next mesh, use nodes, change it to an image texture, and we're looking for the helm again. Okay, so that's that bit done. Hide that bit. Now some of these bits we're just gonna go along now. We're just gonna apply the various. That's a helm piece as well. Apply the various image textures to the right place. This will be part of the body. Now, a lot of people think that this would be part of the body as well. If you choose body for this, and it doesn't quite look right, that's because this is classed as druid hair. So, night elf female hair, and that then turns it to the right object. So we're just going to continue going down the list now, changing everything. Oop, to an image texture. That'll be body, like that. Image texture, and this will be under cape, like that. The shoulders are usually under body, so you can check that they're not always under body. Sometimes they have their own shoulder piece like that. Image texture, and shoulders. And I'm pressing H each time I've finished with it, just to get it out of the way. And if it doesn't quite look right, then you know you've picked the wrong material. Yeah, this will be part of the belt buckle. And again, belt buckle. But sometimes this is part of the body, and sometimes it's part of the belt buckle, so you've got to check. Body looks a little bit more feasible in this one. The skirt is usually always the body. Darkman 1, hello! Again, that'll be hands will be body. Just applying the image textures as we go along. Now this is quite a time consuming part of the process of creating these artworks. And there is a script that you can get that does all this bit for you. However, I've recently updated, so it doesn't actually come through properly for me, the actual script. So this is part of the stave. Last little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we press Alt and H, and that brings everything back for us. And as you can see now, we've got all of our textures applied. Now bearing in mind, if you missed out before what we were doing, we're actually in the viewport shading material mode. If we go to solid, it just brings us back to that. the materials are there. Now there's a little bit more work we need to do before we can actually start putting this into a wallpaper. I would have liked to have got another pose from WoW Model Viewer, but this is the one that we're stuck with, unfortunately. So this is what we're going to deal with. Now, as you can see, there's these big blocky materials that have been brought in, and there's one here as well, and also the face is covered. These are actually transparent layers that's been captured at that moment in time in that frame. And we need to do a little bit more extra work on those particular things to actually make them render as what they should do. So what we need to do is, if you, sorry, I did that a bit fast. Let me just show you what I was doing there. This little bottom hand corner, if you click and drag it up, you'll split the view. And then check this little box here and change it to node editor. And that'll bring us up the material node editor. Just make sure if you're not on, if you don't see any boxes, you're likely on a texture or image texture. You need to make sure that you've got the material selected, and then it's the object and not the world. What we're going to do, we're going to add a little bit of transparency to it. So we just drag these out of the way. And to add a different shader, I'm just using the mouse wheel to scroll in and the middle mouse button to move around. To actually add, you press Shift A. We're going to add a couple of shaders. We're going to add a mix shader. And what we're going to do, we're going to take the input from this first one, and we're going to drop it into the second or the bottom one. And we're going to add another shader with with Shift A, and we're going to add a transparent BSDF. And we're going to drop the BSDF into the shader input at the top of the mix shader. You can see that's already started to have an effect on it, but we're not going to finish there, because if we rendered that now, it would look pretty silly. So what we need to do is we're going to click this image texture here, and we're going to press Shift D to duplicate it, drop it above, and then we're going to click Shift A. We're going to go to converter color ramp. I'm going to drop that in there. We're going to take the alpha output. I think it's the alpha. We'll mess about with this later and see if it makes a difference. And put it into the factor value, or FAC. And take the color output and drop it into the mix shader factor value. Let me just quickly move up to here. I found if you grab the white here, move it across to about there, 0.277 should be enough. Now you might not get these on your particular model, but if you do, then this is how to obviously go about doing it, and you'll know whether something needs transparency or not. You don't have to do it on all the textures, just a few of them. But to make things quicker, what I'm going to do now is quickly we press B and you can select, and we're going to copy and go to another material and delete with X and paste those in there. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate the image, drop the alpha into the factor, the color into the color of the diffuse. Same again on this one. And then there's one more here, as you can see, looks a bit silly. Okay, so it doesn't look right now. If we drag this out of the way because we don't need it anymore, I think we've got all of them. So if I did... Oh wait, no we didn't, we missed one. I don't actually think we need the color ramp for this one, so we delete the color ramp with X and just do the alpha into the factor value. Might be mistaken there, but we'll have a look. Let's try the color. No, that really does get the alpha into the factor. Okay, so if we now did a preview render, I'm not going to see very much because the camera's all the way over here. What we do, we're going to press 0 on the numpad and press N to bring up the menu at the side here, and we're going to look for the lock camera to view, and that basically makes us move the camera around so we can position it with the mouse wheel. If I'm pressing shift in the mouse wheel, it moves across. If I press the mouse wheel by itself, it pans around. And if I scroll in, it zooms. So we want to find nice pose. Well, I say nice pose. This is just going to be a straight on view, more or less. We'll need to unlock the camera to the view so we can move around again. We're going to get rid of this default lamp because we're going to use a mesh to light the scene. So what we're going to do is press 7 and 5 to go into orthographic mode. That's on the numpad, and what we're going to do, we shift. Alright, let me just do that again. We're going to shift and A to add a mesh, and then plane. We're going to grab this green arrow and move it back to about here, and making sure that the best way to do it, I find, is if you click on the helm, or any part in fact, because the geometry is down here, and press shift S and then click cursor to selected. That'll put the cursor in this, underneath the object that we're trying to light. And what we need to do is down here in the pivot point, which is next to the materials, we're going to change it to 3D cursor. So if we press 7 again, and we're going to press R and holding control, which will give us a 5-degree increment, we're going to move it to the left 45 degrees. If you look here in the bottom corner where it says rot 45, that tells us that it's, as you can see it moving around there, that tells us that it's 45 degrees from where we've just had it. Okay, drop it there, left click to accept. I'm going to click shift and D to duplicate, left click again, and we're going to click R to rotate, and we're going to rotate it this way minus 90 degrees. And this is setting up basically a 3-point lighting system. What we need to do is just line ourselves up in between there, and if you put your mouse just underneath and press R twice, and then, oh, never mind that, change the pivot point back to medium point, and you press R twice and then pull down just so it gets to a nice angle facing the model, and press shift to scale it up a little bit, and then we're going to move to the other one. I'm going to double tap R, pull down, scale up, now we're going to give these two objects materials now. So if you come over to the material panel and click new, we're going to call these lights. I'm going to change the surface from a diffuse to an emission. Give this a strength of 20. Make sure that it's set to bright white. Okay. Right click on the other material, and we're going to select those. Well, probably easier to just type lights. We're going to select the lights and give it the same material, but we're going to click the plus button so we can set this one to about 14 or probably do. We're going to be able to play around with these lights in a little while just to make sure that the lighting the scene up correctly. But this is just to give us a bit of a preview right now. So we're going to go ahead and render it there and see what we can come out with. Now, this is a poor quality render because we're only rendering it at 20. But as you can see, the transparency has worked. And we've got a little bit, if you can look very, very closely, we've got a little bit of the spell effect there. And it's got the nice shadow on the face. But that's not what we're going to use for a top quality, but that gives you the idea of where we're at now. So we're going to set up the rest of the environment now. If you come into the world tab and click news nodes, push it more towards the blue and then drop it right down, not quite all the way, but a little bit lighter than black. And when we do the render now, you see it gives us a nice backdrop there. Now, for me, this model doesn't stand out. It seems to blend into the background a little bit. So what I want to do is to continue with the 3-point lighting system. We're going to press Shift S and cursor to center. And we're going to click Shift A, lamp, area. And we're going to press 7 on our numpad to go to the top view. I'm going to grab the green Y anchor there. I'm going to move it back about 6 grid lines. Okay, and we're going to press 3 to go into the side view. We're going to move it up 2 grid lines with the blue anchor. Okay, whilst we're still in this view, we're going to click R, or we're going to press R on our keyboard, and we're going to rotate it to aim at the back of the model. In fact, we could probably move that down to 1.5 grid lines. Okay, we're going to click the lamp settings and we're going to give this a blue tint to it. We're probably going to have to mess around with the strength for this as well. Let's try 1,000. 5,000. This might be a bit too much for 5,000. There we go. You can see it just starting to catch the edge of the model there, and that just gives it that little bit of depth rather than looking completely flat. At the end of the day, this is a 3D modeler, so we want it to stand out. Okay, so let's do a, not so much a final render, but we'll bump up the samples just to see how it's actually looking. So if we give it maybe 500 samples, let's see how that looks. Okay, you can already see a lot better quality. We've got rid of most of the noise. In fact, I think all the noise is gone there. Okay, so now we can start adding things to the environment to make this look a little bit more appealing. So what we're going to do is we're going to Shift S and cursor to center, just in case it's not in the center. And we're going to Shift A, add mesh, UV sphere. We're going to click we're going to click S to scale, and we're going to scale it up and keep going until the lights are within the sphere. Press C to go, press 0 on the num key to go into camera view. So we're inside the sphere now. And what we're going to do is we add a particle system to the sphere. But before we actually go ahead and add one, we're going to name this object N for environment. We're going to Shift A, add another sphere, but we're going to do this one as an icosphere. I'm going to scale it down, and we're going to grab the blue, and we're going to push it out of the sphere just by moving it up. Actually, no, delete that, press X, add a UV sphere. We'll do it with a UV sphere rather than an icosphere. Same again, just get it out of the way so it's not in the view of the camera. And we're going to call these particles. Okay, so right click on this, on the environment sphere, and go into the particles. We're going to add a new particle system. And we're going to change the emit from faces to volume. So that basically does all the particles inside. As you can see the particles. If we Alt A now, play the animation, you can see they're just kind of like everywhere. That's not what we want. So I'm going to give it a value of 10,000 particles just for now, just so we can get a nice amount of them. We're going to come down to here where it's got the render, and we're going to uncheck emitter because we don't want the emitter, which is this big sphere. Because if we were to render this now, it'd just be a huge white background, which is not what we're looking for. So we get rid of the emitter, and that then puts us back into the world, but it still leaves the particle system there. We're also going to change it from halo to object, and then with the duplicate object box, we're going to find the particles object that we made before. And we're going to give it a random size of 0.9. And a size of 0.09. Okay, so now we're going to, in the object selection or the scene selection, we're going to go down and find the particles object. select that. And we're going to give it a material. I'm going to call this particles as well. And this is going to be an emission. Now, I like to use the colour that matches the gear. So this greenish colour, we can use the eyedropper tool, pick that up. I believe it's picked the wrong one. We've got the environment there. Apply it to the right one. Okay, we're going to give him a strength of 3. And if we render that quickly, you see we've got these nice floaty orbs. So that is pretty much the basis of these wallpapers, but however we want to add some motion blur and some depth of field. So if we select the camera and go to depth of field, turn the depth of field off for a minute. Go into user's perspective again. That's by pressing 5 on your keyboard, on your numpad. Okay, so we want to add a null object or an empty object. I'm going to add a empty cube. I'm going to bring it up and we're going to scale it down on the y-axis by pressing S and then Y. And we're going to scale it on the Z-axis by pressing S and then Z, and then we're going to move it up on the Z-axis. Just so it's covering, we can probably scale it on the X-axis, so S then X. So it's just covering like the chest portion of the player or the model. And then if we select the camera again, and in this focus, we're going to look for empty. We then turn on the depth of field. And render it now. We should get the blurring effect of the staff at the end of the stage because it's not in the view. And then we should get these nice optical light flares from the lights that are floating around. Okay, so I have no idea how long this is going to actually take to render at a higher resolution, so we're going to have a quick go at doing it at 1080p. Very unfocused on that face. I think I might Just cancel this render a second.
Looking back at where I started, on my own discovery, what I found where my heart is you and me and love. I never thought when I departed, this road would be so lonely. What I found when things were hardest was you and me and love.
That's come out quite well, actually. Nice bit of depth of field there. Say the unfocus on the end of the stave there. Okay, so now we want to go into the compositor. We're gonna add a few effects. I'm gonna add an output viewer node so we can see what's going on. And this will basically show us whatever changes that we're making as we're going along. So we're gonna add a what we're gonna add a glare node. We're gonna do it to a fog glow with high quality.
Looking back at where I started, on my own discovery,
I'm gonna stay a little bit dark.
where my heart is you and me and love. I never thought when I departed, this road would be so lonely. What I found when things were hardest was you and me and love.
Let's go back to the render settings. I'm going to bump this up to 4K. Let's see how long this is going to take to render. Well, that's rendering. I'll be right back.